or/no sleep on my phone. And we're gonna be reading Spooky Scary Certificates. Alright. Does anybody have a single bit to donate to test the alerts for me? Spooky, that's me. We're gonna be reading there. I'm gonna be reading you like the pages of this book, baby. Yeah, that wasn't a single bit. Why are the alerts all the way over there? Thank you for the 100 biddies. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, thank you for gifting the Spooky a sub earlier. Hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. Hello, my little ghouls and goblins. Are you ready for no more scuff? No more scuff. No more scuff. Alright. I think we're ready. I think we're ready. Ready, ready, ready. Now I just have to spend a minute trying to find a story. That's fair deal. No, where's that? Well, I mean, what the fuck is this stream without scuff? That's fair. Let me sniff you, Graham Girl. My sniffles. Come on, pretty mama, let me sniffle in your ear. I have a favor towards the left side, and I'm trying to fix that. Not during regular ASMR, just like when I'm just like talking. I really should just be sitting here, honestly, but eh. Alright, let's look up. I have absolutely no preparation for this. I just want to go through whatever was at like the top. No sleep. Okay. Hands cracking ASMR. Communities. I know there's a no sleep community. Mo sleep? I guess it helps if I spell it right. Communities. No sleep. Some of these are really, really spooky. Alright. Let's see. The Rotting Candy Corn Cathedral? Interesting. Cotton Candy Scalp? What the fuck are these titles? What the fuck, man? I found an old cassette tape in an abandoned mental institution. I never should have listened to it. Oh, that one sounds good. Is there only one part? I prefer when there's only one part. This is long, but I think we can... Oh, shit. Damn, it's long. Alright, let's try this one and see how it does. Alright, so this story is called Cat Scratches the Scratching Post While I'm Doing ASMR. Please hold. Okay. This one is called I found an old cassette tape in an abandoned mental institution. I never should have listened to it. Me and my friends, Jordan, Ashley, and Sam, are urban explorers in our free time. You're probably familiar with the type of stuff we do, but in case you're not, we go around exploring abandoned locations, record it on our phones, and upload the videos on YouTube. Old abandoned warehouses, amusement parks, industrial complexes, you named it. You named it, we've done it. It's a fun hobby, but it can be scary. Not to mention dangerous. Some of the places we've explored are condemned structures. So, I don't know this word actually. Dilapidated? They look like a strong wind would knock them down. You have to be careful navigating those places and constantly stop to inspect your surroundings. You never know when a rotted stairway might give way under your feet, or a rusted catwalk might collapse and send you plunging 50 feet to a hard concrete floor. Not to mention there's always the possibility of running into some strung-out drug addict or crazy homeless person that might be squatting there. Plus, what we do isn't exactly legal. We've had some close calls. Once, a security guard chased us out of a deserted factory, and another time someone actually called the cops on us. Luckily, the guy wasn't too much of a hard ass, and he let us go with a warning. Yeah, that word. You probably think we're stupid or crazy to do what we do. And maybe you're right, but that's just the way we are. We enjoy the thrill of it. 2 weeks ago, Sam got a tip on a new place that seemed like primo material for our next video, especially with Halloween quickly approaching. An old, crumbling mental hospital in the next county. It had been built in the late 1800s and been abandoned for the 30 years or so. In the early 90s, I believe, and it had a pretty sordid past. Supposedly, it was shut down after seeing some kind of scandal involving an investigative report who undercover as a patient and uncovered all kinds of... What the fuck are you doing over there? Catsman. And uncovered all kinds of abuse and neglect on the part of the staff. There were even rumors that the doctors were conducting all kinds of fucked up secret experiments on the patients. None of that is substantiated, of course. It's just the type of typical bullshit urban legends spring up around a place like this. The official story is the hospital was closed due to the government cutting their funding for budget reasons. According to Sam, the place was scheduled to be demolished soon, and in order to put in an apartment complex, so this was probably our only chance to check it out. So last weekend, the 4 of us hopped onto Jordan's old Mazda and made the 2-hour drive out there to the institution. It was located in a relatively rural place in the outskirts of a city. As soon as it came into view, we knew we wouldn't be disappointed. A foreboding gray stone building, 4 stories tall, with narrow, barred windows, stood in the middle of a sprawling, heavily overgrown lawn behind a high, rusted chain-link fence with razor wire coiled over the top. The main gate was adorned with a faded "No Trespassing" sign, marked with a couple of .22 bullet holes and secured with a thick chain and a heavy padlock. But after a few minutes of poking around, Ashley found a place in the fence where some intrepid explorer before us had sniped a decent-sized hole through the chain link. Thank you for the hydrate. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Through the chain link, probably with a bolt cutter. We slipped through easily and made our way up to the long, overgrown driveway towards the main building. The closer we got, the more creeped out I started to feel. The immense stone building seemed to loom over us, its imposing facade almost resembling a scowling face with many narrow eyes that stared coldly down at the four intruders approaching it. The main entrance doors had been nailed shut at one point, but someone, presumably the same person who had cut a hole in the fence, had pried off the sheet of plywood that had once covered them, and it stood wide open, like a gaping mouth of a beast getting ready to swallow its prey whole. They paused for a couple of minutes, still about 20 yards away, so that Sam could film Jordan standing in front of the institution as he did a brief intro. Then we closed the remaining distance, all of us with our phone cameras on and recording, and entered the decaying building. We were in the main lobby. Thank you for the stretch. That's how you know I'm stretching when you hear the pops. We were in the main lobby / reception area. The floor was littered with all kinds of debris and trash, dead leaves that had blown in through the open doors, empty beer cans, food wrappers, cigarette butts, you name it, presumably. Stuff had been there from the kids. Presumably, stuff that had been left over by kids using the building as a hangout spot, and homeless people looking for a place to get drunk and crash for the night. The walls were marked with graffiti. A bedpan, one of those old-school steel ones, stood on the reception desk. None of us dared to approach it to take a closer inspection. What, you don't want to look at the shitty bedpan? Come on, be brave. We looked around for a while and eventually found the main stairway, standing next to the long, dead elevators. No electricity. We went upstairs to explore the second story. It was the hospital's administrative wing, offices mostly. Honestly, there wasn't much interesting in most of them. The place had been pretty thoroughly cleared out. The institution was shut down, and all that remained were some empty filing cabinets and discarded pieces of ancient office equipment. In the hospital director's office, a cardboard shoebox stood open on the otherwise bare desk. I peered inside and saw it contained a number of old audio cassette tapes, still in their cases. I flipped through them out of curiosity. There were a couple dozen of them. They had various names and dates carefully printed on the labels. I didn't know what they were, but Sam suggested that maybe they were recordings of therapy sessions with former patients. I grabbed one at random and threw it in my pocket to take back with us, just as a souvenir, and then we continued on our investigation. Filming anything we found that looked even remotely interesting. Truthfully, the whole trip was kind of a letdown. There wasn't much to see or film, and the top 2 floors were patient rooms, but they were almost all vacant except for a couple rusted bed frames, more litter, and the occasional graffiti artist tag. The place didn't even have a particularly sinister or creepy ambiance. Once you were inside, there were no operating tables scattered with dried blood or rusted surgical implements. Not even a spooky abandoned wheelchair standing off into the corridors. The institution had been minimum security when it had been operating, so it wasn't like there'd be any especially violent or dangerous patients kept locked up here. In other words, there was no dungeon ward in the basement where the likes of Hannibal Lecter had been imprisoned safely away from the general population. It could have been an abandoned office building for all the atmosphere generated. After about an hour, we decided to call it quits. Jordan filmed the outro, apologizing to the audience for the video being such a disappointment. And then we left and got back in our car and drove home without incident. I went on with my normal routine and had pretty much forgotten all about our little exploration of the mental hospital until Wednesday morning. When I was getting ready to leave for work, I couldn't find my car keys, which I typically carried in my pants. I was desperately hunting my apartment for them in a rush to get out so I couldn't be late, and searched for them in my jacket pocket, not finding them, but instead the cassette tape I had wiped from the institution. I'd completely forgotten all about it. I had other priorities at the moment, so I just tossed it on my desk for the time being and went on with my search. I eventually located my keys. They'd slipped out of my pants and had found their way under the cushions of my couch. Got to work in a couple of minutes late. That evening when I got home, I spotted the cassette on my desk, and after dinner decided to give it a closer inspection. It was one of those 90-minute jobs that fit into a full-size portable tape recorder. Carefully printed on the label, by hand in faded black ink, were the words Bennett, Michael, and a date, 8/17/91. Intrigued, I went into the garage and dug around until I found my dad's old recorder. I popped in some batteries and entered the cassette. I wasn't sure if either the recorder or the tape would still function after all this time, but figured it was worth a shot. Plugged in a pair of earbuds into the recorder, put them on, and then pressed the play button. For a few seconds there was only a hissing sound. Then a dry, clinical man's voice spoke in a professional monotone. The audio quality was still surprisingly clear and only slightly degraded even after 30 years. Patient 67531, Bennett S. Michael. Session number 7. Session being conducted by Dr. Eugene Winters at 2 p.m. on August 17th, 1991. There was a few seconds of hissing silence, and then the audio resumed. At first, the only sound was a man's heavy, slightly uneven breathing, and then the professional clinical voice from before. The doctor spoke. "How are you feeling today, Michael?" The ragged breath continued. There was no answer. "Michael?" A second voice spoke. It sounded like it belonged to a younger man. The voice was agitated and tight with suppressed emotion. The voice of a man in turmoil, struggling to retain his composure. "What the fuck do you care how I feel? What does it matter? Anyway, there's nothing you can do. All you do is ask me the same goddamn questions, over and over again, every single time." The emotion behind those words could have been rage or something else. "It's an integral part of your therapy, Michael. We have to get to the root of whatever the source is of your mental distress in order to give you the necessary treatment you require so that you can function normally again and return to society." "Bullshit," the younger man interrupted with a shout. "You're playing with my fucking head. Like all the other shrinks did. To you, I'm just another freak who can play your little mind games on. Some nut you can exploit to be published in all your medical journals." The doctor spoke softly. "I'm only trying to help you, Michael." A contemptuous snort. There's nothing you can do to help me, Doc. There's nothing anyone can do. There was anger in the voice, but something else too. Fear. Please, Michael. You have to work with me if you want to get out of here. You refuse to tell the other doctors that you're too afraid of what causes you to wake up in the middle of the night screaming. Why don't you tell us, Michael? Tell me what you've been so scared of all these years. Several moments of silence, and then the man spoke. All the rage was gone from his voice, but the fear remained. He spoke with defeated resignation. Fine, I'll tell you. Just so I can tell someone and finally let it out. You'll think I'm crazy, but everyone already does. That's why I'm in this loony bin. Why the fuck not? He chuckled humorously. He took a few seconds to gather himself before he began. Do you know what it's like to live your whole life knowing the worst thing you could ever know, Doctor? The worst thing anyone could ever know? Do you know what it's like to live every single moment in pure terror? Terror of what, Michael? What if you could see things that other people couldn't? Things that people weren't meant to see. Know things humans weren't meant to know. I can see these things, Doctor. It started when I was 8 or 9. That's when I first began seeing them. Them? The doctor asked. The Forgotten Ones. That's what I call them. They call themselves the Ancient Ones, or the Originals. What are they, Michael? These Forgotten Ones. People talk about hauntings, about seeing ghosts. You hear about it every time. Some people even claim to be able to communicate with them, channel them for a living. Spiritualists, psychics, whatever you want to call them. Most of them are full of bullshit, frauds. But maybe there are a few real ones. But psychics deal with dead people, human ghosts. The man paused to let out a shaky sigh. If it was the ghosts of people, I might be able to cope with that. Maybe I could have gotten used to it and come to accept it with time. But the Forgotten Ones are not human, and they never were. Go on, Michael. I'm listening, the doctor urged him. Thank you for the buddies. Ugh. They're old, very old. They died long before mankind ever existed on Earth. But before they died, they lived here for a long, long time. The planet is billions of years old, Doc. And human beings have only been around for a couple of million. Do you honestly think that ours was the first civilization that ever existed? And no one was before us? They were the originals of Earth. They had been dead for hundreds of millions of years, long before even the dinosaurs came along. But their spirits are still here. They have always been here, invisible to us, watching us. There's no afterlife, you see. No heaven, no hell. When you die, your spirit is just stuck here, forever. The Forgotten Ones saw the human race evolve. They saw our civilizations rise. And they hate us. They always hated us. They see us as intruders, invaders, thieves who took the world that was once theirs for ourselves. I see, the doctor interjected patronizingly. Yeah, sure you do, the man muttered cynically. What do these Forgotten Ones look like, Michael? You don't want to know, the man replied in a strained, trembling voice. They're monstrous, beyond description, and so full of rage and envy and vengeance. I know all of this because they tell me. They communicate to you, the doctor asked. Oh yeah, all the time. I know I can see them. I can't understand what they're saying when I'm awake. When they speak their own language, but when I'm asleep, they come to me in my dreams. And then I can understand. The Forgotten Ones hate us, but they can't harm us. They can't touch us, because they're ghosts and we're alive. We're safe from them, as long as we're alive. But when we die, when our spirits separate from our mortal bodies, and we cross over into their realm, then it's payback time. There was a long pause. The doctor said nothing to break the silence. The man resumed. Whoever came up with the notion of hell, of demons, of tortured souls, and the eternal damnation, maybe they caught a glimpse of what the Forgotten Ones do to the spirits who are dead. That was where the recording ended. The audio cut off, and the hissing silence resumed. I listened for a couple more minutes, but there was nothing else, and then I turned off the recorder, ejected the cassette, and just sat there, staring at it for a really long time, disturbed by what I had listened to. Out of curiosity, I entered Michael S. Bennett into the name of the mental hospital and the name of the mental health hospital into Google and did a search. I found an obituary in a local newspaper for Michael Samuel Bennett. He had died on November 11th, 1994, at the age of 31, but the obit didn't say how. I did a bit more digging and found a newspaper article about his death. He died alone in his apartment of liver failure after a long struggle with alcohol addiction. There was a picture of a man with a gaunt face and dark, haunted eyes. I couldn't find anything to suggest that he had a history of mental health disease or had ever been a patient of the institution. Maybe his family had wanted to keep this out of the paper, or maybe the hospital records had been kept confidential. Maybe it wasn't even the same guy. The things that guy said on the tape still creeped me out. He sounded so convinced, so sincere about the things that he claimed to be able to see. I tell myself I'm making a big deal out of nothing, that what I had heard had been nothing but the rambling, paranoid delusions of an extremely disturbed mental patient. And that's all it is, right? That's all it can be, right? The end. Clap, 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 clap. ASMR claps. Kind of left off on a cliffhanger, though. Thank you for the petties. That was interesting. Alright. I rest my head on my mic. Head on my mic. I think we're gonna pull it up on my computer, though, because reading that like that kind of sucked. My elbows hurt. My elbows. Alright. We're gonna pull it up. I can't do it like that. I can do it like this, though. Aha. Maybe the buddies. Thank you. Also, hey, matcha. 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 Alright. Let's see. We've got just want my mom to be normal. The cotton candy scalp one is NSFW, and that scares me. Should we try reading an NSFW one? And before TOS. I wish it said what about it was an FW. What about it was an SFW? People keep flashing their high beams at me. My new strange town is a set of rules. Survive. My grandmother's story. The Lost Man in the Woods. That might be good. How long is it? I mean, it's about the same length as the one I just read. I will copy paste it into a Google Doc so I can read it like I did the scripts that one night. Wee. Okay. Google Sheets. That Sheets, Google Docs. Google Docs. Okay, and then it was this one. Paste without formatting. I'm gonna try and check on chat every once in a while, but I'm gonna have to switch glasses. Alright. Greetings all. My grandmother led me here. Oh wait, no. My granddaughter led me here. Okay. Greetings all. My granddaughter led me here. Told me it's a place where people who enjoy the spooky and supernatural come to get their fix. She is helping me share my own story. I thought you guys might be tickled by it. These events came back to me at a recent family reunion. For fun. The last of us awoke that night, went in a circle, and swapped our scariest moments stories. It was a good time, as family members shared UFOs and creaky attics and near-death experiences. A trick floorboard in my mind popped up, exposing something my subconscious had kept hidden, perhaps for my own good. So when their eyes all turned to Granny K, likely expecting tales of past era poverty or teenagers with tattoos at the trials of childbirth, I leaned in and recounted to them the last time I found a lost man in the woods. It caused quite a stir at the family, and the insistence of my darling granddaughter, I'll share it with you now. This is something that happened when I was in my 20s. I won't embarrass myself by telling you how long ago that was, but suffice to say, it's quite a bit of prayer above the airs these days. My first husband, Ronald, was a ranger, and for 5 years we lived together on BLM Island. Our regular backcountry excursions instilled in me a passion for the outdoors that was uncommon in a lady back then. A woman might be found on a long walk or a national park or with their husband and children in tow, sure, but I was partial to taking a knapsack and charging into pure, isolating wilderness. often spending 2 or 3 days at a time following trails or inventing my own. Those excursions were often my greatest piece, especially after Ronald passed and our 6 years together. It was about a year after Ronald's passing that I was setting out for a 2-day trek in the Pacific Northwest. Washington or Oregon, I think, though the detail still remains beneath the floorboards. The trail looked attractive on the map, and it followed a river through a vast mountain valley that separated two small towns. I believe it had once served as a supply route between the towns before the road system came, which it was merely a recreational trail, though not one to be taken lightly. The locals would warn all the most avid outdoorsmen to avoid the route. There was a point in the valley that required a difficult river footing. This ford occasionally took the lives of the cocky or the unprepared, sending their bodies bobbing downstream to be recovered by the town at the other end. But I reckoned I was avid enough. Also, thank you for the follow. Thank you, thank you. A friend dropped me off at the trailhead as I had left my car parked in the town at the other end of the valley. I was immediately put to test by the steep hike up the mountain saddle and a precarious descent down the other side. It was past midday before I was rewarded with even terrain in the valley below. I managed the infamous river crossing cautiously and without incident, and then resumed the trek onto the opposite bank. The trail followed the river a few mere miles before it leaned away, sending me from high grass and wildflowers into a forest of evergreens. The sun was beginning to angle towards the western range as the trees closed in behind me, surrounding the world with gentle emerald dim. I made my way over the soft earth beneath the trees, grateful for the shade after a day exposed beneath the summer sun. The air was muted by the mossy quiet, and the lens of the evergreens sliced the light into haphazard bars of gold. It was dense, verdant, old-growth forest, the kind that feels like a cathedral, proud and reverent and secretive. I've always loved and sought such places. The trail took me downhill until the shade grew darker still. Then came a point where the pine needles underfoot fully obscured the path, and I paused, carefully peeking around the evergreens to spot where it might pick up again, trying not to lose my place. I had the compass and map, but only food enough for a day and a half. I didn't want to be lost in the boondocks if I could help it. This was before the edge of the satellite phone, mind you. Thank you for the follow. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. After a few moments of unsuccessful scanning, I decided to backtrack to see if there was perhaps a Y in the trail that I had missed. I turned 180 degrees to find myself looking into the eyes of a man, some 10 or 12 feet behind me. I had no clue how long he was there. My brain, in the panic at the moment, skipped right, surprise, and landed directly on bewilderment. "Oh goodness, hello," I spit out, mostly on impulse. I'm sure you could see the shock in my face, but he gave no sign of it. "Sure is easy to get lost out here, isn't it?" he replied, simple, even tones. His appearance was the perfect outdoorsman, practically out of a sportsman magazine of the day. Work boots, canvas pants, held up by suspenders that ran over a navy double-breasted shirt. Double-breasted shirt. God damn it, I can't fucking read. The black cuffs of his sleeves were rolled up along his elbows, and the sleeping bag strapped on his rucksack poked out from behind his head. Yet, despite his textbook appearance, he didn't feel like a woodsman to me. His bearded face was middle-aged, with the skin deeply creased and dropped at the neck and jowls, as if he was much older. Beneath that laid-back eyebrows were grayish eyes that seemed unable to focus on any spot in particular. Splotches of sweat darkened his pits and neckline of his shirt and gave off a rank odor that disgusts me even in memory. He offered a strained, toothy smile as if he had descriptious of smiles I was trying out for the first time. As if he had heard descriptions of smiles that he was trying out for the first time. Let me increase this font so I can fucking read it. Alright. There's the font increase. There, that should be better. I gotta find my spot again. It certainly could be, I replied with an exaggerated politeness. Recentering myself internally. Sorry for my surprise. I didn't hear you come up behind me. The man ignored the comment. Are you lost out here too? He asked. His expression reminded polite earnest. But behind the foggy gray eyes, I detected something else. Something I couldn't put a word to. Instinctively, I began to take mental inventory of what weapons I had at my disposal. The best I could come up with was my Swiss Army knife, which was unfortunately tucked into the bottom of my knapsack. I could hear Ronald's deep, stern voice echo into the back of my head somewhere, saying, "You should have packed a gun, Christy. You never know what you'll run into." I shot Ronald's ghost, and it's "told you so" away, and I had to focus back on the man. Certainly not lost, no, I responded carefully, not wishing to make myself any more vulnerable than I already was. But you said too, are you lost out here? The man rocked on his feet, his eyes scanning vacantly in my direction. Yeah, lost. People wander out here, get lost, he replied. His voice was gravelly, delivered in flat, dead tones. But sometimes I find them wandering through the forest, stepping and breaking, trying to find their way. So I help them, take them back to the river, so they can follow it out. I can help you too. Help you find the river. At that, he set his empty eyes upon me, truly locking his with mine. His expression transformed into something equal parts pained and furious, as if I had betrayed him in some horrible, intimate way. Primordial part of me awoke, and a wave of adrenaline screamed the spirit into the maze of evergreens surrounding us, but a firm, clear voice of instinct told me to stand still. So like a mouse being fixed upon in the house cat, still I stood. Well, not lost, though I am sure this trail can be a bit of a trouble for some. I certainly appreciate the offer, though, I said, in the most friendly tones I could muster. A few sunbeams were making it through the trees overhead. I knew I needed to move things along. I think I better get moving while I still have some daylight. I have some friends hiking in from the other end, expecting to meet me at camp tonight, so I can't afford to get off too schedule. This was a lie, of course, but I wanted him to think that others would be coming back soon, as I was expected. But inside I wished more than ever that Ronald was with us again. The man practiced his disconcerting smile even more, and his eyes blissfully unfocused. Yes, still have some light, he echoed, in his staccato. The walkers get lost, making little circles in the forest. If you lose your way, I'll lead you to the river. In the tension of the moment, I didn't progress in the woods, but it was clear that something insidious glared out from behind them at me. Oh, of course, thanks. I'll keep that in mind. Happy trails, I practically shouted, eager to detach, and commence a rigorous power walk in the direction I had left off at, unsure if I was continuing on the true trail or not. After a few dozen paces, I began pleasedly to see indications of the path and took back to it. A few minutes of concerting, near jogging later, my heart thumping in my ears and my pack trembling against my back, I slowed to a walk and watched over my shoulders to see if the strange man was following me. I put in some considerable distance, and it was the greenish dark murk of the forest. I saw nothing but ferns and evergreen, and coming around far back on the trail, there he was. Not necessarily following, I suppose, but walking in my same direction, staggering down the path along the skinny yards behind me. He moved awkwardly, almost drunken, like someone learning to walk on a prosthetic. And the moment my eye caught him, his head snapped up. Even from that distance, I could feel his cold gray eyes lock onto mine. And I knew then it wasn't coincidence. I was being followed. I whipped my face forward and picked up my pace. The last miles of that day were hiked briskly and stressed. No matter how much speed I put in my pace, that man would always somehow catch up behind me. Down the trail, despite his disjointed walk, I would lose him for 5 or 10 minutes, then catch some sight or sound of him persisting ever forward. And so I had no choice. And so I had no peace, never breaking, often run jogging, but never able to get more than a few minutes of isolation before I would hear his feet cracking the branches along the path, or see his dark silhouette come around a bend of the trail behind me. The last tangerine rays of the sun faded from the forest floor when I realized I would have to stop. I was losing the last of my visibility, and although I was tempted, I knew that hiking in the pitch black was foolish. Using my torch to find my way around would make me a beacon to the man at night, but on the other hand, hiking blindly would mean almost certainly losing the trail, getting me no closer to escape. And it could mean injury or death if I was unlucky, and I was not feeling lucky. Instead, I resolved to make my way far off trail as I could, quietly set up camp, and wait for the first light of daybreak to serve as a starter pistol for a mad dash to the end of the valley. I didn't love this plan, but no other ideas came to me. So I crept past the tree line, quiet as a fox, and gingerly set up my one-man pup tent behind the couple of interlocked evergreens that stood vanguard between the camp and the direction of the trail. The spot was encircled by ferns and brambleberries, the best cover I could find. From amber dusk to pale moonlight, I had just enough light to see what I was doing and moved quickly on sore legs and blistered feet. I didn't bother with dinner or coffee or any rituals typical of a trip to the backcountry. I scarcely remember drinking water. What I do remember is laying atop my sleeping bag, unwilling to constrict myself within it, fully dressed with my Swiss Army knife clenched in my fist, the blade out and ready. I spent my time breathing evenly, laying silent, and listening. After a couple hours, I began to calm. The man had never been more than about 15 minutes behind me down the trail, so if he was a tracker, he would have long since traced me to camp. If not a tracker, I suppose he had already overshot my camp, making a successful backtrack to my location near impossible. I was just beginning to form an estimate of how long before daybreak when I heard movement in the woods. It was a snapping, cracking, and something moving ponderously over the forest floor, probably 20 to 40 yards away. I prayed for the first and only time that it was a bear. The only other thing in these woods heavy enough to make that much noise would be an bullet which tend to not move so sporadically or loudly. My every muscle froze as the intermittent cracking and snapping moved towards my camp. I held my knife to my chest like a cross, watching the moonlight side of my tent wall for a shape to take form. Then, after a light snap, some 10 yards to my left, the woods went silent. I laid there, tense as a plank of wood, terrified to so much as breathe. I stared at the shadows of the ferns and trees, boughs that moon cast against my tent wall, awaiting for one of them to transform into a shape of the man and lunge. But no phantom assailant came. The shadows only lengthened and dissipated as the moon moved through the heavens up above. But I remained fixated on the bluish wall of my pup tent, counted breaths, and waited. It must have been hours before I dared to turn my head away from the direction of the snapping in the forest. The moon by that time had angled in the sky towards the other side of the camp, and as I righted myself, I saw, on the opposite wall of my tent, the shadow of the man. He loomed above the canopy, perfectly still, perhaps just an arm's reach away. I was taken with panic. In the wan late evening night, the silhouette's head turned ever so slightly so as to look directly down at me. "Little Walker, I knew you'd get lost. Let me help you find the river." The man's voice had changed. It was no longer the masculine voice I had heard delivered in gravelly staccato in the trail earlier. It was vaguely feminine, sweet, and melodic, every word dripping with acid. It was a voice that would come from a spider. A spider could speak, and when I heard it, I knew I was going to die. I'm not lost, I thought, or perhaps I whispered it. Either way, I remember it took all I had to make the words come. I know where I'm going. At that, the man reached out, pressed his palm against the upper wall of the tent, imprinting a black handprint against the fabric. "If you are here, then you are lost," replied the voice from inside the man. "And the lost belong to me." The handprint against my tent spasmed, and I watched as the hand of the silhouette convulsed and rolled back. Black shapes emerged from where the man's mouth was, cylinder tendrils that twisted and unfurled upon the man's throat, coiling and writhing in the air around the head, making a grotesque shadow puppet shoot out of the moonlit wall of my tent. In the terror of the moment, my impulse was to scream, but somehow, in the hot foam of the fury and indignation that should die from the will of this incomprehensible thing, the scream croaked out in the form of words. "I am not lost." I surged up in a miraculous clean cut, sliced the tent's fabric from the canopy of the floor in the direction of the man's shadow. The hand pulled away, and I sprang outwardly, blindingly prepared to sink the Swiss Army knife into anything that might find purchase. But before I could hear my exit, I heard the man's "Hey-oh" from the trees not far off camp. It was deep, soulful bellow that rattled me and carried like wind around the evergreens and brambles. I knew the sound of my heart. It was Ronald's voice. The call he would make to me when we would hike together in the wilderness of the ward-off bears. Only now it came with such force that I felt it and surround me, a wave of feeling and longing of sound. It was the same moment I heard the garbled, vicious words of the thing that spoke. I know not what, and by the time I was righted to my feet, outside of the tent, ready to attack, there was only silence. I scanned the shifty darkness of the woods, watching the trees and shadows around me like there were watchers of skies. My heart was pounding, my body still ready for the fight. But I was alone. No man, no silhouette, no creature, no Ronald. Just a woman alone in nature, panting through the adrenaline and fear. After some time, I shook off my dread, stuffed my ruined tent back into my knapsack, retrieved my torch, and carefully picked my way back to the trail in the dark. From there I began the route again, holding my torch out like a night watchman, eyeing the tree line while being careful not to lose the beaten path. Occasionally I thought I heard movement far back behind me on the trail. The light of my torch never caught anything in the shadows of the forest. A few miles later, daylight began to trickle through the canopy of the evergreens. An hour or so after that, I noticed the trees becoming smaller, further apart, and the rush of the river in the distance became a soundtrack for my walk. By the time the trail rejoined the river, the woods were well behind me, and I soldiered on through the open valley in a stupor. At some point, I reached the Minger town where I had left my car parked. By the time I realized I was walking on pavement, I was practically at town center. I'm sure I drew disconcerting looks from the locals. The tap house where I staggered in, a mess of matted hair, sunken eyes, with my knapsack bulging and half-zipped. But I took no notice. It had always been my and Ronald's tradition after coming back out of the back country to celebrate with a bourbon and a beer. I ordered 2 of each, as I knew he had joined me for a final hike, but that was me to drink on his behalf. The barmaid took my order with the pouty indifference of someone who had served a stranger orders to strangers' patrons and went to task, and finished both the bourbons and most of the second beer when a commotion broke me from the solitude of my thoughts. The excitement was directed at a tiny television mounted in the corner behind the bar, and the pouty barmaid turned the volume up at request. It was the county news station. There was a plaid man in short. It was the county station where a pallid man in sports jacket was breaking the press release from the sheriff's office. The news ticker said, "Sheriff recovers body of drowned hiker." The camera cut to the sheriff explaining that the man was a hiker from Canada who likely drowned while attempting to ford the river in the Valley Pass. He had been dead for 3 days before washing into town at the high river. Later that morning, several bar patrons issued tuts and low whistles, the dirge of the cynical and unsympathetic, while the sheriff issued a tired warning that the river fording was dangerous and not to be attempted by those without proper training and experience. My thoughts went to the man, to the confident pilgrim of nature he must have been, perhaps too confident even, until a few days ago when he got himself lost in some very old woods, where he weaved and wandered through the evergreens, hunting for a trail, until something found him, something that took him to the river, where it takes all its lost travelers. But I was never lost. The end. Little claps. That was pretty good. I liked that one. That was actually pretty good. 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Now the question is, do I do one more? I'll be right back. Hang on 1 second. Okay. Let me see if I can find one short one. Alright. Is this one long? Oh, this one's short. I found a short one. Nice. Alright, we'll do one short one, and then we'll end. Right? Right? Scary mouse. What? Alright. Ah, shit. I did that the wrong way. Paste without formatting. There we go. This one's short. It is called... That's not your mouse? Oh, okay. Sorry. Alright. Blink. Blink. This one is called... It's a very simple title. My door keeps opening at night. You misunderstood me? Did I? Too scared, can't sleep. Oh no, I'm so sorry. No, I understood your pain. Alright. The door keeps on opening during the night as the cat eats the food. Sorry. My door keeps opening during the night. I moved into my new apartment a few months ago, right towards the end of summer. This apartment is very typical. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, a kitchen which leads into a living room as well. This would be the first time living on my own, but I was confident. I knew when my rent was due, my budget for food, and all of that stuff. I was sitting on my bed looking for jobs when I first heard it. I heard my door creak open and then close abruptly. As you would imagine, I was very confused, but a couple of searches throughout my apartment let me calm down. A few minutes later, it happened again, a slow creak and then a sudden slam as the door was shut. This time, I was more annoyed than scared. I went through my apartment one more time and found nothing. After a little thought, this was the explanation I came up with. The door to my bedroom has this broken latch, which is stuck, as if somebody was constantly holding it open, which means that my doorknob is useless. And I can push and pull my door open, as I tend to shut my door often, which means that my bedroom can get pretty hot and the air becomes pretty stale. This means I have my window open almost 24/7. This also means that my door opening and closing is the result of the draft that comes in through the window. The wind will push the door, then it gets cut off, letting the weight of the door push it close. This began to happen so often that I didn't even bat an eye to it. A little while after I started my courses, I was up late night studying as some of my first exams were coming. It was particularly cold that night, so I went and closed my window. For my position on my bed, I didn't have an immediate sight. Line to the door, and I would have to lean forward to get a good view of it. As I was reviewing the material that my professor had posted, I heard that all too familiar, slow open and abrupt close. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and immediately I felt the sensation of that I was being watched. I took wary steps towards the door and opened it, staring into the dark void that was my bedroom. No, bathroom, sorry, my bed. Staring into the dark void that was my bathroom. Through my entire apartment, and no window was open. In other words, there was no way, or no reason, that the door should open like it normally did. There was no logical explanation. Unless... No, stuff like that isn't real. I went back to my bed and tried to get back on track with work, but I couldn't think straight. All I could think of was that somebody was hiding somewhere in my apartment, just watching me. I thought to myself that there was no way I was sleeping in my apartment tonight, so I called up a bunch of people from school, or literally anyone in the area, to see if anybody had any room for me to sleep. But alas, they had no room for me, as most of them already had 3 college students in a 2-bedroom apartment. Totally pissed off, I looked towards the direction of my room and shuddered. I ended up sleeping on the couch. Nothing happened for a few weeks. I had almost forgotten about it. If it weren't for that door almost constantly drifting open and then slamming shut over and over. One night at about 2 a.m. I shot awake suddenly. I had no nightmares, no bad dreams, nothing. I didn't even feel tired. I was dead awake. I had closed the window before I went to sleep because my apartment is right next to a train station, and the noise was unbearable. I had sat there, just listening in deep silence, the only noise that was blood pumping through my ears, and then I finally laid down. I heard the door creak open. It didn't close. I leaned forward to get a better view of the door, and I screamed. Looking back were 2 eyes, equally bloodshot, as if the thing was just crying. The pupils were black as the darkness that had surrounded it. I sat there, paralyzed. I saw a hand, which looked like it was manifested from the darkness, resting on the door. The skin was wrinkled and hung loose from the bone. Its fingers were long and thin. Its nails were like daggers attached to the end of its fingers. It rhythmically tapping its fingers on the wood, still staring. Its eyes were upturned, as if it were smiling at me. Yet I did not see any mouth. I was beyond horrified. All I could do was watch as it waded into the room, moving awkwardly as if it had just grown these limbs and were just testing them out. He came to a stop at the foot of my bed. It looked as if this figure had been built from wire, elongated beyond proportion. Could see his ribs poking through his skin, begging to be freed from his rib cage. He was almost as tall as my room, easily being over 10 feet tall. He raised his impossibly thin arm and pointed at me. I heard one thing. Leave. I didn't have to be told twice. I jolted out of bed and ran past him towards my front door. It felt as though I ran for 100 meters. It felt like an eternity. It was impossible to escape, and I wasn't moving. But I reached the front door. I swiftly grabbed my keys and sprinted out. Before I left, I took one look back, and the figure seemed to be smiling, staring at me, running away. I quickly moved out after that, only returning during the day to pick up my shit and leave. I found another apartment that was a bit more expensive, but I was happy to pay whatever to get the hell out of that place. A few months after, whilst I was working on an English essay, the news station was on in the background and caught my attention. Recently, a landlord at the redacted apartment buildings has been arrested for murder of 6 tenants over the course of 3 years. His most recent victim, Sadie Redfield, was reported missing 2 months ago, and when Sadie's neighbors reported a foul stench coming from her apartment, room 163, 2 police officers showed up on the scene and found the landlord cuddling with Sadie's decapitated body. The news showed an image of the landlord and his name, and my blood ran cold as I recognized the man as my own landlord. Just then there was a knock on my door. I walked to it, and on the doormat was a box. I looked left and right down the corridor and saw no one. That was weird. First of all, I didn't order anything. And second, there wasn't a delivery guy outside. And third of all, how did someone get away so fast without causing any noise? I picked up the box, and attached to it was a small post-it note. See you soon. I opened the box and screamed. Inside the box were a bunch of photos of me sleeping and laying in my bed, all taken from the creaking door. The end. Blah, blah. Yay. Oh, that one's creepy. I'm not sleeping tonight. Fuck that shit. Holy heckaroni. No thank you. Yeah, they're all neat. They're not bad. I enjoy them. What? The only reason I can only read so much. No sleepies. How about more stream? That was very interesting. I can't. The only reason I don't want to read too much is because my throat gets very dry after doing that. That was so loud, and I'm so sorry. I didn't realize my cup was almost empty. Do it again. No. It's empty. I can't do it again. I think that might be... It feels kind of weird to go into regular ASMR after that. For real though, thank you for the stream show. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course. Don't worry about it. I have fun doing these things. But I think that's a pretty good short one, honestly. So, I think we will call it there and see if we can find someone to raid. Maybe someone who's also doing spooky stuff. Wouldn't that be nice? Bop. Well, no one on my list is doing ASMR. That's unfortunate. We are gonna have to find a new friend. Thank you for the putties. Oh, let's find new, not super sexual friends. Let's see. Just chatting, Minecraft, Vampire Survivors, is there an ASMR I can click on? Just chatting, Emily sleeping, special events, there's ASMR, boop. Oh. Ear numbing, that sounds kind of cute. Let's see if I can find spooky ones first. A stinky girl ASMR. New friends aren't bad, I hope. That's fair. Drunk by Foo Stream. ASMR for you. Anybody else doing spooky, scary stuff? I would prefer a Vtuber, but it's not necessary. A lot of this is in another language. ASMR for juicers. I bet that's interesting. Oh, that's Russian, but it's Halloween. Damn it. Tiny hands ear massage. Stay calm and keep whispering. Relaxing massaging. A lot of massaging tonight. Oh. This is not looking promising. God damn it, Sasha. Shh, go on. Oh, this looks promising. What is this? God damn it, Sasha, no. That's a rerun. Quick shit. I love you. You're adorable. Give me a moment. Experimentally. No, this is. No one's doing ASMR tonight on our end. This is really interesting. There's Don't Starve ASMR, but it's subs only. Sasha, god damn it. That one has ear licking. I know you guys are a fan. We may just have to end. Ear licking. Japanese. Relaxing mouth sounds. Oh, she's beautiful. Oh. Sticky hand sounds. Diablo 2 Resurrected. 24/7 ear licking, no ads. No? Shit. Let's see. Spooktober, soft reading. Oh, here we go. Got it. Perfect. New friend. also a smaller streamer, so it's perfect for us. Do we want to do, what kind of custom raid message do we want to do? How about... This one's kind of hard. You're doing soft reading and stuff. Oh. Cozy raid? I was thinking something spooky though. A spooky bad ASMR raid. That one's not bad. Is there anything about the stories that we read tonight, maybe? Wait, I'm not lost raid. How about that one? I'm not lost. I'm not lost, I'm not lost. Oh shit, I did it wrong. Oh my god, it keeps doing it. There you go. I love you guys. I hope you had a wonderful night tonight. Sorry it's a short one, but I love you guys so much. I hope you have a lovely night, and I can't wait to see you again. Bye.